So, you think it might be time to do some thread chasing. Thread chasing can be very satisfying. I started thread chasing about 5 years ago. Now I'm up to about 5 different sets of hand thread chasing tools. So I want to compare and contrast and give you some information that might be useful for you in purchasing your first set. I want to give this shout out to my buddy Sam Angelo, the Wyoming woodturner, whose videos that I watched many years ago. Like I say, I've been thread chasing about 10 years, and I got started by watching Sam's videos. So if you're getting interested in thread chasing, check out his playlist on thread chasing. Hand thread chasers come in pairs. One chaser for the interior thread, one for the exterior thread. There are a couple on the market, such as one by Mark St. Ledger, where he's cut it on both sides with a handle. And Carter & Sons, which I don't have, also uses the same, with a male on one end and a female on the other. One of the first things we need to talk about is thread pitch. Generally there's fine, medium, and coarse. I find that, let's start talking about the fine first. I have one set of 20 thread per inch chasers here from Robert Sorby. Frankly, I find them the easiest to use if you have the appropriate wood. And we'll talk about the appropriate wood in a moment. There are some downsides. One is you need to have wood that's very difficult to get and expensive. The other one is that they're very fine threads. There's a little more possibility of cross-threading. The good news is that they're the easiest to learn how to use because they have the finest points on them. Therefore, you have the least amount of steel on the wood. And with that fine thread pitch, they tend to track a lot slower. In other words, you have twice as much time, or it takes twice as long to move an inch with 20 threads per inch than it does using a much coarser thread pitch, such as the 10 TPI by Sorby. So the slower the traverse, the easier it is to manipulate the tool. So that slower traversing speed with the 20 teeth per inch, you can actually run your lathe a little bit finer, a little bit faster, or maybe closer to 400. And the faster you could cut threads, the more likely you're going to get a nice cleaner cut. Whereas with the 10 threads per inch, you might have to slow it down to 200, 250, and that's a little more difficult to get as clean a cut by hand. Now, I would suggest the best bet is the more middle of the road 16 threads per inch. I have a set of those. I have the set by handcrafted in the United States by Mark St. Ledger, and then I also have the Robert Sorby. Now, the coarser threads per inch can cut threads into wood that might not be suitable for finer threads. I've been very successful in cutting wood. Well, let me back up and mention something about wood. For the very finest threads, such as 20 threads per inch, you just about need an exotic, expensive exotic wood, such as it could be Mopani or Burmese blackwood, or perhaps Cocobolo or African blackwood. I call it uranium enriched wood because it's scarce and it's expensive. There are no domestically commercially available woods in the U.S. that I find will hold to 20 threads per inch. You may find something that is not commercially available, perhaps mountain mahogany, perhaps mountain laurel, but again, I find the 16 threads per inch a much better size. Now, the 10 threads per inch, you can, like I say, cut. I've been very successful in cutting with, for example, Bradford pear, but I've also been able to cut 16 threads per inch in several woods in the U.S. I mentioned mountain laurel. I've also been successful in doing it with 16 threads per inch with Osage orange, dogwood, and mountain laurel. Other than Osage orange, some of those, and maybe even that's difficult to find, they may not be easy to find commercially. Now, the one thing I use the coarse thread, 10 threads per inch, is I hand thread a screw chuck, as I'll show in this video, when I reverse a box that I cut with a jig at 10 threads per inch. Okay, we're going to make a jam chuck out of some side grain pine. Let's see how that goes. Start at an angle. These don't have to be perfect threads, they just have to be good enough to hold a box for a little while. And I think that recess may be a little small, so we'll come back here and take just a little bit of it out. Slow it down, turn this at an angle. Alright, let's see how close we got. We're not going to register it. It's running pretty true. So we're going to use that. So it doesn't take a lot of effort to make a screw jam chuck. Threads do tend to cut better in a very dense, close-grained, fine-grained wood, such as blackwood or boxwood, as I did in this recent video, where I cut these hand thread chase this box with 16 threads per inch. This beautiful piece of English boxwood that I got from my friend Emiliano Archibald. If you missed that video, there'll be a link above. Another option for cutting threads, especially finer threads, is PVC. Probably not suitable for anything but practice, but it's certainly a very ring diffuse, very tight grain if you're practicing. Stabilized wood or acrylic, such as this beautiful box from my friend Chris Woodall that he cut hand thread chased, very, very fine threads, 20 threads per inch in stabilized wood. Beautiful, beautiful box. Let's talk about steel. These things come in a variety of steels. The Robert Sorby is M2 steel, like most of our wood turning tools. The Carter & Sons, which I don't have, is a little harder steel, M42. I'm not sure that that's necessary, but I'm sure it keeps a very fine edge. My other Carter & Son tools do hold up an edge a little bit longer than M2 steel. But we're not dragging a bowl gouge along the dirt for several miles with a hand thread chaser. So the steel you use is not as significant. I believe, but I wouldn't swear to it, but I believe the Mark St. Ledger's handmade ones are probably made out of carbon steel, and they work just fine. You're only going to going to tend to stroke it a few times with a hone before you thread chase anyway. So not an issue. I believe this pair I've got recently acquired from Crown is not high-speed steel. It's not marked as high-speed steel. I suspect it's probably carbon tool steel, which is fine. So let's walk through some of the different manufacturers, and just let me talk a little bit about about them. First of all, handles. Let me mention handle size. The handles don't need to be longer than about 5 inches, and I find this, I really love the handles by the Crown set. They're not real thick, they're easy to hold, they're only about 5.5 inches long. Similarly, the handle that Mark St. Ledger uses, got a little screw on it, some kind of plastic to hold it in place. A very reasonable size, fits in your hand well. Now the Robert Sorby's, which I have 3, I've got the 20 and the 16 and the 10 TPI. The handles are much longer. You don't need a long handle because you're using this tool in front of you. It's not, you're pressing very lightly, so you don't have to leverage it. It's not hanging over the tool rest, and the tool is pretty much doing the work with very little effort on your part. So you don't need a big handle like you would on a bowl gouge, reaching over the tool rest into a deep bowl. So I find this handle, the 3 Sorby's, longer than I need, so it's a little harder to pack, carry with you, and frankly to use. Although they're adequate. I think after looking at the beautiful handles by Crown, I very well may turn a different set of handles for at least one set and try them out, and I may wind up replacing all the handles on my Sorby's if I can find time to do that. The Sorby's are also, I find, you're going to choke up on the handle, and you've got this big bulge here where you choke up, where it's just not as comfortable as a smaller one, such as this Crown or the Mark St. Ledger. Now the handle that comes with the Carter & Son, it's got a big ball in the middle. I don't have those. I've never really used it. I picked them up and examined them. The ball didn't feel comfortable in my hand, but I think some people like it, some people don't. But you can take the ball off. It's just got a set screw on it, so that's not a big issue. One of the factors on how well made the tools are is the lead tooth that's doing most of the work has to be a complete tooth. So if it's not, it has to be, you have to ground off that fraction of a tooth. In my 3 Sorby sets and the one by Mark St. Ledger, they have a complete tooth on the female and the male thread chaser. The set from Crown, unlike that, has a partial tooth. I'm going to have to grind away on the female. The male is fine. Frequently, when you get your thread chaser, it might require some minor modification. For example, on the Sorby's, I ground the back of the female recess to make it a little easier to get in and out of smaller openings. I would probably do the same on this Crown. On the Mark St. Ledger, it's fairly small, so I would not modify this one. For the male, there's something they call a whale tail, and you can see that on the Carter & Son tools, and it makes it just a little easier if you've got that whale tail recess. There we go. I've cut one here on this 16 thread per inch. Makes it a little bit easier to get in and out as you get close to the recess on that male tenon. May not be required. Some of that's a user preference as your skill develops and how you might want to refine the tool. Most of them would benefit from softening the edge a little bit on the corners where it comes across the tool rest, just so there's no sharp edges rubbing, similar to a skew or a scraper. You want it to just glide over the tool rest. So the other issue is what is readily available to you to purchase. In the USA, you have a somewhat limited choice. The most readily available are the Robert Sorby's, and like I say, I've got 3 of them. They work well. I like them, although I think the handles are a little large. Robert Sorby sells them in a 10, a 16, and a 20. Again, I'd recommend the 16. Mark St. Ledger manufactures his in a 16 and a 20. The crown, which I only found one vendor in the U.S. that sells these, and that was Hartville Tools. They come in a 12, a 18, and a 20, which I found kind of an odd selection, although the 12 is kind of moving toward a little bit away from the course, but I think the 18
Actually,
is
Isle
probably
sells a
little
unique
too fine,
design,
and certainly
thread
the
chaser
20
16
for my
thread per inch
taste.
unichaser, where you flip it over and to cut a male thread. Very reasonably priced. I like the handle since it's very similar to the one by Crown. I'm not sure I would like using it, although it's probably not a fair comparison with this video I did on doing making one out of a bolt, but cutting a male thread in the direction of a female thread just was uncomfortable for me. Ooh, it's hard work because I'm having to press laterally with my hand. It's very difficult.
So if you want to see me turn this boxwood box with a 16 teeth per inch thread, click on the link above. So if you want to try something different, give hand thread chasing a try. I think, like me, you may find it to be very, very satisfying and kind of separates you from some of the other wood turners. I'll leave you with this quotation by Walt Disney: "The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing." Y'all stay safe. Come on back here.